And good morning. Welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues. And we wrap up a series today with a very interesting gentleman who's been a longtime friend of ours.
Well, indeed. Jim Priest, the Democratic candidate for Attorney General, is finishing up our three-part series on Meet Your New Attorney General. And if you folks have been watching the last 2 weeks and watch this week, I promise you, you will have met your new Attorney General because we've had them all three on for your benefit. Jim is off and running fast.
He certainly is, and we'll have a chance to get to know Jim Priest a little bit better. What does he have to offer to the citizens of Oklahoma? It's all coming up today on The Verdict.
Natural gas is the gateway to a better world of energy. Instead of waiting, natural gas moves us forward now. Instead of finding ways to make dirty energy cleaner, natural gas simply is cleaner. We can use it to create our own energy, a wealth of new jobs, and keep more money here at home. Learn more at chk.com. Chesapeake, America's champion of natural gas.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Today we're very pleased to have with us Jim Priest, a Democratic candidate for Attorney General here in Oklahoma. Jim is the third in our series of candidates that we're talking with on the Attorney General's position. He did his undergraduate work at Houghton College, graduated magna cum laude in law from Syracuse University, has practiced law in Oklahoma City for over 30 years. He's with the Whitten Burrage and Priest firm. He's principally done a lot of work in the employment law area and litigation area. He's been active lecturer and frequent guest on radio and TV shows on matters dealing with the matters of the family and ethics. He is involved in many civic and charitable activities in addition to his law practice, and we're sure pleased you take time to join us today, Jim. Welcome.
Thanks, Kent. Mick, good to see both of you guys, and thank you for inviting me here.
Great. How's the campaign going?
Well, I was thinking about that. Everybody asks you that question. Of course, everybody who's a candidate says, oh, it's going great. None of us really will know until November. But I feel good about where we're tracking. We're meeting lots of people across the state. I think our campaign has a lot of enthusiasm and momentum. And I always call it our campaign because it's not my campaign. It's partly my family's. It's partly our staff and our volunteers and certainly the people across the state, whether they're R's or D's or I's. The Attorney General is the Attorney General for all the people, and we want our campaign to be that same way.
Now, this is your first run for elective office, I think, is it not?
It is.
And you took a pretty big bite here for going after a statewide office. When did you really decide that this is something that you thought you'd like to try to do?
Well, it started about maybe a year or so ago. My last child, Spencer, graduated from college. And you know, when your kid graduates from college, you get a raise, and you also have some extra time.
I'm counting on that, by the way, but go ahead.
Hoping. I knew I was going to be investing time in doing something. And so I began to look at some of the service opportunities that I'd had in the past, the Regional Food Bank, Habitat for Humanity. And as I was weighing those things, about that same time, General Edmondson announced that he was going to run for governor and would not be running for Attorney General. And so I began to watch and to see who was going to step up to the plate to run for Attorney General. I knew it was an important office. General Edmondson had been there 16 years, and so it was going to be a new person after a long-term Attorney General. And eventually, I was approached and asked if I would consider that, and so we prayed about it, we thought about it, and I realized that this is a way to serve the public on a little broader platform. It's an area that I'm experienced in. I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, and I could be the lawyer for the people of the state of Oklahoma. So after praying about it and talking about it and making sure that everybody in the family and in my law firm was okay with it, we jumped in and formally announced last November.
And you've been traveling, I guess, ever since? What as a candidate, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, we do both travel and, of course, make a lot of telephone contacts with people in these first 5 or 6 months. I've been all over the state over the 30 years I practiced, representing a lot of law enforcement agencies across the state and clients from the Panhandle down to Little Dixie. And so it's given me a chance to go back and see all those people. And you both know we have a wide variety of geography and climates and people and food. And I've gotten a taste of all of that over the last few months. I've eaten lots of chili. I bought a lot of pies at pie auctions, and I've had kolaches and at the Prague Festival. So it's been great meeting people, and I'm a people person. I enjoy that very much, and listening to them.
What questions are they asking you when you're listening and they're talking to you and asking you questions? What's on their mind?
Well, the first question that most folks ask me is, why are you doing this? And they ask it with that tone in their voice like, are you crazy? Because somebody at my age and stage of life and with my history doesn't typically go into a political election or a public service spot like this. And I tell them it's public service. So I try to talk to them about what motivates me to run. And then they begin, of course, asking about substantive questions. They want to know what I'm going to do about the crime problem. There's been discussions, of course, about healthcare issues. There's been discussions about corruption. And probably the most frequent question I get and the answer I hear when I ask questions is the meth problem and the prescription drug problem. What can we do to drive that down?
Mm-hmm. Well, I took a minute prior to the show and looked at your website and noticed right off that one of the top priorities, if not the top priority that you say will be yours, is protecting the people of Oklahoma as Attorney General. How would you go about doing that?
You know, when I looked at the Attorney General's responsibilities, and there are many, I thought, what's the common denominator in all these many areas that the AG has responsibility over? And I came to the conclusion pretty quickly, it's all about protection. Whether it's consumer fraud or natural resources or crime, the Attorney General stands in the gap between those who would threaten the people of the state or the resources and the people. And so what I do is kind of talk about the umbrella concept of protection, and it has, I think, two phases. One is prevention and the other is prosecution. We want to get ahead of the curve and do things like through educational opportunities to prevent crime from becoming a problem, to educate people about domestic violence, to help seniors understand that they can speak out when they're abused or neglected. And then if that prevention doesn't work, and we know just from real life it's not going to eliminate problems 100%, then we have to deal with the prosecution end. And of course in the crime arena, the Attorney General's office, I think, is a facilitator and a helper and comes alongside our frontline forces, which are law enforcement and our district attorneys.
I have a question. Should an Attorney General be proactive, or should he be receiving his workload? In other words, should you have an agenda of things that you want to accomplish, or should you just be looking at all the opportunities that are out there and picking and choosing based on some sort of priority system?
I think you have to prioritize, particularly in our economy where your resources in state government are limited. And with the broad responsibility scope that the AG's office has, you have to prioritize. I would be both proactive. You're going to receive some duties and responsibilities and lawsuits that you have to deal with. But I think you have to go into the office proactive with an idea. These are the things, ideally, I'd like to try to accomplish and the priorities I'd like to have.
Well, what about the environment? Because I know Drew Edmondson was brought in a lot of environmental issues all over the state of Oklahoma. Is that a special interest of yours?
It is. And I've been talking to folks around the state, and not just in areas where there is water, of course, but where there's areas where there is very little water. Water is the new oil, and people are very concerned about it, both from a pollution standpoint and from a sales standpoint. Are we going to sell it to Texas? Are we going to sell it intrastate? Do we fight the people that are polluting the water, or do we try to resolve that? And I think that's going to be a tremendously important responsibility of the Attorney General for the foreseeable future. And not just water, of course. I think that's the first one, but I think you have to look further down the road in natural resources for things like air pollution. We have a problem on the horizon, literally on the horizon, coming up from Texas, air pollution generated by coal-fired plants in Texas. And so that's an issue we're going to have to deal with, hopefully in a way that we can resolve it without litigation.
Well, I wanted to follow up a little bit on that, resolving it without litigation. You have been a facilitator all in your practice, your 30 years plus of practice. You've been a fellow that's been easy to deal with and easy to reach a reasonable solution with, pardon the preposition. Would you kind of use those skills to try to avoid litigation and work it out in advance?
Yes, absolutely. And I make my living in the courtroom, but I tell my clients all the time, make litigation your last resort. Don't go to court unless you have no other alternative, because it's going to take longer than you think it will. It'll cost you more than you ever anticipate, and the result is likely to be something that you don't like. And so if two people can get together, or two parties, or multiple parties, and work it out themselves without having to submit it to a jury, they're far more likely to have an economic solution and one that they can live better with because they've had input into it. So yeah, I'm not afraid to go to the courtroom, and I've tried probably close to 100 trials over the years, and that helps with the negotiation process. If the other side knows you'll go to the courtroom, that's good. But I always try to resolve things, and I've resolved far more lawsuits than I have tried lawsuits.
Jim Priest is running for Attorney General. He's today's guest on The Verdict, and we'll be right back.
I'm Major Matthew Newmeyer, currently stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and I'm a Chickasaw. In 2003, when I was part of the drive to Baghdad, I found being a soldier was going to be a lot more than just firing your weapon and being in a combat situation. Being a warrior, but also being the good citizen. That is probably why American soldiers are so respected, because here are 18 to 20-year-olds, 1 minute they're in combat, people are shooting at them. The next minute, they're treating children just as if they were in their own home. That warrior ethos that the Chickasaws had also translates directly to what you do as a soldier. Strength, integrity, the grace, and the idea that you're part of a greater community, that you give to that community, that you find it important to be the best you can be at what you're doing.
In Oklahoma, with the technology that's being developed every day, it would be difficult to get much better than it is now, but I anticipate that it will.
Technology's always going to improve. It's always going to get better, and as it does, these fields will give up more and more of their natural resources.
I think with technology and the way they're doing it, it'll be a good, clean, environmental place, and I'm blessed to be here.
The oil and gas industry runs deep in our history and gives us a sense that we have a really strong future ahead of us.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers and today's guest, Attorney General candidate Jim Priest.
Jim, in one of your answers in the first segment, you talked about how you deal with crime. Your website talks about the Attorney General needing to combat crime. What proactively would you do to combat crime in Oklahoma?
Right. There's a whole umbrella of things that we can talk about, but I want to focus on a couple of things if we can. I think we have to be tough on crime and tougher on criminals. But tougher doesn't necessarily mean locking them up and throwing away the key. We've tried that, and we've only been marginally successful in reducing crime. So one of the things that I would do, and this goes back to your point, Mick, about being proactive, we see an increase in cybercrime. We certainly people are very concerned about both children and seniors being abused and scammed on the internet or preyed upon. So one of the things that I want to do proactively is to create the first ever cybercrime unit within the Attorney General's office to work with a comparable unit in the OSBI, and to make cybercrime a priority so that we're protecting those most vulnerable citizens that the AG is supposed to protect. So that would be our kids, predators on the internet. We've seen lots of news stories about that. And seniors, although seniors probably don't use the internet as much as younger people, they also are victims of crime and scams on the internet. So that's one thing. The other thing that I've done is put together a panel of law enforcement advisors I call the LEAP group, the Law Enforcement Advisory Panel. And these are sheriffs and district attorneys and people from state agencies, so that I hear from people on the ground about the issues that they're facing. And one of the things I've learned through this is the tremendous problem with prescription drug abuse. It's so accessible. Kids go to mom and dad's prescription cabinet or medicine cabinet, and they take drugs and they go out and have what are called farm parties. And there are ways, and Daryl Weaver with OBNDD has done a great job working on that particular problem. And so the Attorney General's office can help assist in that way. And then the third thing, it's amazing to me how poorly equipped our law enforcement officers are just in fundamental tools like flashlights and patrol cars. I was talking with Stacy Puckett at the Chiefs Association, and there's some police agencies in the state that don't have enough money to purchase new flashlights. They don't have operational vehicles because they can't afford to get them repaired. And so as Attorney General, I want to help them write grants and find money to help them do their job and pool resources, seized vehicles, get those out to police agencies that need it.
Is consumer fraud getting more prevalent or less prevalent? What's your take?
I think it's better known. I don't know if it's more prevalent, but it's certainly, we see it more, and because of the information age, we see it quickly. And I like to think of consumer fraud, we typically think of it as people being scammed on telemarketing or roofing scams, but businesses are victims of consumer fraud as well. And the Attorney General's office, again, represents all of the people, so both individual citizen consumers and business consumers have to be protected by the Attorney General's office, and there's divisions in the office that deal with that, and we'll make that an important part of our job.
You speak of the fruit and the root of our problems. What are you talking about there?
Right. Well, Jesus in the New Testament talks about, you will know them by their fruits. Grapes don't come off thorn bushes. And so if we don't like what we see in our state or in our nation, then it's because that's at the root. If you get oranges off an orange tree, it's because at the root of it, it's an orange tree. And so we can't deal with problems like crime by just picking off the bad fruit. We've got to dig up the root. And so there's a number of initiatives that I want to launch through the Attorney General's office to deal with the root of some of these problems. One of which, and it's not very often talked about in this kind of a campaign, but it's the issue of fatherlessness. And I wrote a column for 10 years in the Oklahoman about family issues and the importance of prioritizing family. But one of the chief characteristics of those in prison, in fact, the most common characteristic of those in prisons, is the lack of an involved father in the home. And so as Attorney General, I want to launch a fatherhood initiative to encourage dads, whether they're at-home dads or divorced dads or however they're involved with their families, to be involved with the life of their kids and to strengthen the family unit. I think that's one of the root issues. And then to deal with problems like what drives people to drug abuse and drug use. Probably 70%, from what I'm hearing from district attorneys, 70% of the crimes they prosecute are in some way drug related. And so we've got to deal with drug problems through novel and creative ways like drug courts, instead of just putting people in prison where they get a graduate degree in crime.
Yeah, David Prater was on several weeks ago and spoke about the advancement of drug courts in Oklahoma County during his 4-year term as district attorney. Is there anything the AG's office could be doing to expand the use of drug courts in Oklahoma?
Definitely, and it's not certainly within the power of the Attorney General to create them or fund them or anything like that. But I always talk about speaking out on behalf of Oklahomans. Yeah. I think you speak softly sometimes as Attorney General. I like Teddy Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick. And so there are things that the Attorney General, because of the position, can do behind the scenes to encourage people and speak up for ideas like that, and then also can use what Teddy Roosevelt called the bully pulpit, to speak in a loud voice and to say we ought to be doing these things if we're really concerned about lowering drug use in our state.
How would you handle the employment of outside lawyers if necessary?
Lawyers get picked on an awful lot, and they're easy to pick on. But everybody needs a lawyer at some point, and then they like lawyers.
They like theirs.
They like their lawyer.
Well,
That's right.
most of the time.
Right.
Not always.
But the problem is that the state's work cannot be done without outside counsel, either because of workload or because of expertise that's needed. And so what I would do is I would install a competitive bid process with a request for proposal anytime there was a need for outside counsel. And we would look at both the qualifications and the cost of relative law firms that want to submit to bid for that work. And then an independent panel would recommend 3 people to me, or 3 law firms to me, and I would select from that, similar to what we do with the Judicial Nominating Committee currently in the state. And I think that's the fair way to do it. We don't want the lowest bidder. You don't want to ride in an elevator that was created by the lowest bidder. You know, that kind of makes you a little nervous on the ride up or down. And we don't want legal work handled by the lowest bidder if they're not the most qualified.
The criticism that is often voiced, I don't know its validity, but the criticism that's voiced about using a competitive bid process and employing outside counsel is you got to move faster than that.
Right.
That the competitive bid process takes too much time. The interests of the state could be harmed by that delay. How would you handle making sure the interests of the state in the interim period between applying and selecting, the interest hasn't been harmed?
I think you can tailor the process to fit the need. And I was a member of a large law firm for 25 years here in town and helped manage and lead that firm. And I know that law firms can move fast and submit a proposal when they need to. And so if there was an urgency like that, then we would just shorten the time frame within which the bid would need to be submitted.
You have indicated on your website that you'd work with the state auditor inspector's office on trying to make sure that our state agencies are functioning correctly. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've already sat down with the current auditor, Steve Burridge, and talked with him about ways, if he's successful in his campaign and I am in mine, that we could work together. But whoever's in the auditor's office, the auditor has to work hand in glove with the Attorney General. And the recent Skiatook School District audit is a good example of that. Steve went in and his team audited that. They found that the school district was spending $179.50 for a $5 mop head and $60 for an $8 wastebasket. Well, they dig out those facts and then they can present them to the Attorney General's office, who then might refer it to a district attorney or might prosecute it itself. But it has to be a hand-in-glove complementary relationship.
Jim, we're running out of time. I want to give you 30 or 45 seconds here just to talk to the citizens of Oklahoma about your election and why they should vote for you.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, I think you're making a hiring decision when you hire or elect the Attorney General for the state. I told people all the time, I'm engaged in the longest job interview I've ever been engaged in. I get to answer lots of questions and meet lots of people. And the question that I want to ask, and I think citizens want to ask in hiring an Attorney General, is what are their qualifications? Are they legally qualified, and are they qualified in terms of people skills? Because that's both required in order to be successful on any job. And I think if you review my qualifications at our website, jimpriest.com, you've heard a little bit today about that. I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I can do this job. I will do this job effectively for the people of the state, and I'll do it in a way where I get along with people and protect our most vulnerable citizens.
All right, Jim Priest, candidate for Attorney General. Thanks for coming on The Verdict.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Kent and I'll have a final word right after this.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to The Verdict. We are wrapping up a show with Jim Priest, candidate for Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma.
I think we can safely say, Mick, after these three shows have aired and the viewers have seen all three candidates, we are going to have a good new Attorney General. I don't know who it's going to be, but we're going to have a good one.
Two Republican candidates in that, I believe it's July 27th primary, and it looks like Jim Priest will advance on to November and take on the survivor.
Yes, and the surviving Republican candidate and Jim Priest have agreed to come back after the primary and debate on our show.
I didn't know that. That's good news.
Well, that's new news.
Okay, way to go. Way to get that lined up. We got a couple of websites we want to tell you about. First of all, if you'd like to have more information about Jim Priest, his website is jimpriest.com. And of course, you can go to our website and tell us about a show you'd like to see, theverdict.tv. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next time, right here on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.